Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Alan. Really good, mate. Really good. Nice to talk to you.
So the World Cup draw gets made, and Ireland get the Springboks. We knew we were going to get one of the top nations because obviously we were in the second pool this time. Springboks, fair enough, that's okay. And then the draw gets made for who you play in the quarterfinals, and it's France at home, or it's New Zealand. Do we start our planning for the World Cup in 2027 now and just blah 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 away the 2023 one? Is that what happens? Is that how we?
Well, mate, there's one way to look at it. We've got nothing to lose. Because that's, I read this little article put out saying that there was no easy draws, and you compare that to Australia's draw, who have drawn Wales in Pool C, and if they win that, which they should, they'd face Argentina, which obviously Argentina or Japan, but I would suspect Argentina. And that's a much, much easier task to a semi-final than what Ireland have got. Ireland have got, wow, a mountain. That is very, very tough. Very, very tough, yeah.
Because your reward for beating the Springboks is still going to be New Zealand or France. It's like, well, what do you do? Do you rest up for this? I don't know. I mean, look, we're very far away from this, but it does kind of cast a pall over everything that happens in Irish rugby because we've got ourselves into this horrific situation where the only thing that matters is this one match in a World Cup quarter-final every 4 years, and we keep flunking it.
Yep. Yeah, they do. Now, look, to be fair to Ireland, you can't do anything about a draw. That's nothing to do with the team. That's nothing to do with the coach, nothing to do with the organisation. Draws are what they are. And you get a good draw, you get a tough draw. They've got a tough draw. They've just got to prepare. Now, if they go out there with a different mindset to what they've had at the other World Cups, and this is what I think it could be advantage. The last number of World Cups I've been in Ireland, I couldn't believe the way everyone was talking about the preparation. It was like as if this was a genius team that were just going to cruise through. And I'm sitting there going, well, I don't think that's the case. I think they're going to really struggle to get through these quarterfinals. Whereas now, no one's going to expect them to get through. No one's going to expect them to win. To win that is going to be near impossible. That takes a lot of pressure off the team, but it also sets their mindset at a very different place. They know they've got to really work beyond any way they've ever worked to have a shot at winning a quarterfinal. I think that could be a really powerful thing for Ireland going into a quarterfinal, because we have to just say, we have to just acknowledge, not to blame anyone or stick a knife into anyone, but the preparation for the past World Cups obviously hasn't been where it needed to be, because they've lost the quarterfinals and in many cases quite horrifically lost the quarterfinals. So this is an opportunity for the nation to reset, not to get our expectations where they should be, but for the team to take an opportunity to say, well, we've got nothing to lose, but we also know we've got to be better than we've ever been, or there is no chance at a quarterfinal.
And it does seem so strange for us to be obsessing about a quarterfinal, like there's a medal or a trophy at the end of that game. Like, that's the other part of this. So we had Pat Lam on at the start of lockdown, and he was like, yeah, I never really quite got your fascination with the quarterfinals because that's not the end of the tournament. I know you've never done it before, but it's not over. And he was like, maybe you need to think about maybe have a bigger ambition than that.
Without doubt. I think for the obvious reason that Ireland have bowed out at the quarterfinal every time. Now, I can tell you when France beat New Zealand in 2007 at the quarterfinal, New Zealand were obsessing about quarterfinals as well. And New Zealand obsessed about winning a World Cup up until they won in very controversial circumstances, I might add. A very poor refereeing exhibition that day denied France many penalties, and New Zealand won. But New Zealand had a monkey on their backs about World Cups. There's no doubt about that. They had a massive psychological problem about performing at World Cups. A number of the players, the New Zealand players, tell the story that when they got back into the change room, they broke down in tears, not for joy, but for relief when they won the World Cup at Eden Park in New Zealand, 2011. So, the World Cup brings a lot of pressures, and certain countries and certain teams have handled them very well and other teams haven't. So, but I think the point I would make about Pat's comment, I'm a great believer in that on a number of occasions, the best team at the World Cup has not won the World Cup. But the team that can get through a quarter-final to a semi-final, you got a great shot at it. And I would suggest to you that in 91 and 99, Australia were not the best team at the World Cup. But they got through their quarterfinals into a semi-final, and then they didn't play the best team in the final. They played France in 99, who had completely shocked New Zealand, who were a great side with Jonah Lomu in it, in the semi-final. And in 91, they got through and beat England, who had beaten France in the semi-final on a brutal day. That France were the best team in that World Cup. So if you win a quarter-final, you give yourself a real big shot at it. But if you don't win, I mean, what do I say? Do I need to go on? Do I need to explain?
I'm just going to put forward a positive theory here from an Irish point of view. So let's just focus on the possibility that it might be France in a quarter-final and the problems that come with being the host nation. Let's go back to 2015 and remember how England absolutely collapsed under the weight of their own expectation in that home World Cup for them. The expectation, Matt, is already here now for France. The expectation is that we played the World Cup 2023 winners just 2 months ago at the end of the Six Nations. On top of that then, let's bring it back to see if we can top our pool. And they're playing South Africa. You will know that last time South Africa won the World Cup, they weren't all that good in the 2011 Rugby World Cup. Australia beat them in the World Cup final. Is this complete lunacy to think that actually maybe there is a path and a world in which Ireland might be able to pip those two and just, sneak away from New Zealand and not have to play them at all?
Well, of course not. Of course, the weight of expectation on France will be massive. There's no doubt about that. I mean, the whole country. I'm talking to you from France. I'm living down in Narbonne, and I'm talking to you from here right now. And I can tell you that the expectation that's being built by the French themselves, not by anyone else, but by the French themselves, is staggeringly big. They think they've got a shot at winning this World Cup. They have been in the final twice, never won it, and this is their big shot. They're putting this alongside the Football World Cup of '99 when of course they won the Football World Cup, hosting the World Cup in France, and this is going to be the same thing. There is no doubt about that. I suppose to give it balance, France will have a sensational team, in my opinion, by 2023, barring injury. They have really got some exciting young players coming through, and they're doing an exceptionally good job on blooding them and bringing them through. We only had to watch their performance against England. I don't know if your listeners and viewers are aware, but what happened was Fabien Galtier, the French coach, had come to an agreement, almost a pact with the devil, where he was only allowed to play his best team 3 times during the last autumn internationals. He didn't know he was going to make the final, so he chose to play them 3 times on the way through in the pool games, if you like, for want of a better term, the lead-up games to the final. They won those, they got to the final, and he couldn't pick his best side. He had to let them go back and play for his club. So he picked many second and third string players who had to play England at Twickenham. And the talk all week, and mea culpa, I was saying it as well, that they put out a third string side and England are going to kill them. And of course, these young men came out and gave what can only be described as an inspirational display. It was truly one of the best performances I've seen in a number of years. It was just, we use the term courage and bravery, I think it gets thrown around a bit too more, but this was courage personified. These young guys were just incredible at Twickenham against a fantastic English side who they outplayed. And except for some very well publicised and I think absolutely outrageous refereeing, they would have won that game. So while it's not impossible, and there is going to be an absolute ocean of weight on the shoulders of the French team, they're going to be a pretty good side. So, there's no way that Ireland can cut this up other than it's a mountain and a giant mountain. But again, I'll take it back. That is different for Ireland. That's a different way for them having to go into a World Cup. They've always gone in with over-expectation from the Irish public. And I think that's been a burden for the Irish team. And I also think they bought into it. You know, Robbie Kearney's book, Robbie's a great guy, a friend, and I was on TV with him a couple of months ago. Not a criticism of Robbie, but in his book he says that he didn't realise, the team didn't realise going into the last World Cup in 2019, that they were in trouble as a team playing until they got beaten by England at Twickenham by a cricket score a couple of weeks beforehand. And then it dawned on them. Now, I read that with I just couldn't believe what I was reading, because to me and the rest of the rugby world, Ireland have been in trouble for a year. Now, if they change their mindset going into this World Cup saying, well, we got trouble from day one, they'll come out fighting rather than with an over-expectation. So, yes, that's when they can switch it on France. So they've got to use both. There's going to be a weight of expectation on New Zealand. Don't forget, New Zealand they haven't got monkeys on their back. They've got gorillas. And France are going to have expectation, and they're vulnerable. Everyone's going to expect them to beat Ireland. And that's when Ireland can quite often pull off a great performance, especially if they get their mindset right. And that's what I'm focusing on. Ireland have got to focus on themselves here.
The mindset question is really interesting, because it's obviously the biggest challenge for any coaching staff. Once you get the technical proficiency to a level that you know it's going to be sustainable under pressure, getting the mindset right is obviously the hardest thing to do. It was interesting from the kickoff in the Montpellier-Leinster game. Leinster swarmed on Montpellier's kickoff, and Devin Toner looked like a 19-year-old, spry, sliding along the ground, ripping the ball from his. And you're like, wow, look at this. We could do a little bit of this from the Ireland team at the moment. But you know, I hate comparing one coaching ticket's performance with another coaching ticket's, because they're completely different jobs at a different standard. And yet it's hard not to, just as a sports fan, going, these are the same players, and look at the clarity of expression that they have in every activity they do. Are we just working through the difficult period of a new coach bedding in? Is that what's happening at the moment with the Ireland team?
Look, you know, I have great fears for the coaching ticket of the national side. Great fears. The next few months are absolutely crucial for Ireland and the current Irish coaches. I think if they don't perform, if the team doesn't perform in the next Six Nations, well, I think the leaders at the IRFU, David Nucifora, and the leaders at Irish Rugby have got a massive decision on their hands, because I just think the performance from the Irish national team, despite what a lot of people inside the group are saying, has been very poor. And we do have to acknowledge, and I can tell you, I know, coaching at provincial level and coaching at international level is totally different. For Leinster's sake, I would not want Leo to go in there now. I think it's a particularly hard time for the national Irish team. I would like him to stay for another few years to prolong his career at Leinster before he goes to be the national coach. But I think he is our next national coach, without doubt. He sits in the background. There's Leo Cullen, the Leinster coach, and is so quiet, doesn't say a word, lets everyone else take all the limelight. He just cruises under the radar, which is exactly what he did as a player when I coached him. He didn't want any of that sort of stuff, but he's a great leader, great mind, and doing a phenomenal job. I have huge, huge respect for what he's doing at Leinster. But that is a different level. Montpellier were a rabble. They were poorly organised, but Leinster just took them apart. But the difference is Leo has now got 5 or 6 years under his belt as a head coach, and you know, Andy Farrell's got 5 months, 6 or 10 months. Like how did we appoint? And it's not against Andy. It's just you got to have skin in the game. You've got to have the yards. You've got to make your mistakes as a coach. Every coach makes mistakes, and you've got to learn from them. But when you're learning and doing it at national level, wow, that's so hard. And the team has not played well away from home. Now, we talked before, who are they beating? They're beating Wales and Scotland. Well, we expect them to beat Wales and Scotland. Wales have dropped dramatically. Scotland have dropped dramatically. It's the big games, especially not on Irish soil, where the teams have got to really stand up and perform, and they haven't done that. Now, is it early in Andy Farrell's rain? Yes, it is. Have we seen promising things? Well, I think it's been pretty mediocre. What's the future hold? Well, that's going to be the key. What do the leaders do? If they perform in this next Six Nations, then we go, okay, well, things are working. We agree. Keep going forward. But if they're not, there's some really, really tough decisions to make.
What would the definition of performing be for you? So does that mean we have to win the 2 home games or one of the 2 home games against England and France and compete for the championship? Is that the level that Ireland should be at when we have England and France at home? We've over the last decade generally considered ourselves competitive at the top level.
Yeah, and we have been. Ireland have been. You know, again, people accuse me of being negative. I'm quite open to say that when Ireland beat New Zealand in November 2018, I said they can win the World Cup. When they won the Grand Slam against England at Twickenham on St Patrick's Day in 2019, the first half performance was the best performance I have ever seen from an Irish side. The first half at Twickenham when they won the Grand Slam was the best performance. Since then, their decline has been dramatic. So what do we expect? Well, you can't. I'll give you another example of what I just said before. The young French team performance against England, they didn't win, but that was an incredible performance. Now, when we go to Twickenham and we run into English players 270 times, run into them 270 times, and we don't even look like scoring a try till our substitute 10 comes along and chips over the top. That's not a performance. I don't give a rat's what's gone on there. Those sort of performances are not up to standard. Now, if Ireland come out at Twickenham or Paris, and they're really tough places to go, but they put in good performances. They're showing that they can break down defences. They're showing their defence is capable of holding. They're showing that they've got a different kicking strategy than what they've had in the past. They're showing these things. That's progress. Now, England and France coming to the Aviva, that's going to be very interesting because Ireland have got a sensational home record. I think it's 19 games now that they've only had one loss, I think, in the 19 games. That's brilliant. So we need performances. It's not always going to result in wins. That's not the way international rugby goes. And I'll give you an example of Australia. They had 2 draws. They beat New Zealand once, were walloped twice, but had a draw. Now they won the draw, if you like. And that's what I mean. Playing a great side like New Zealand, you go out and you see performances and you go, well, it's a mixed bag, but there were a lot of really good things there. Wasn't perfect. We're not at New Zealand standard just yet, but there's been growth. Now, right now, when we look at that Irish side, I can't see growth. That's what's really worrying me.
Matt, you say that you think Leo Cullen's going to be the next Ireland head coach, possibly. Is it a copy and paste job in terms of the entire Leinster coaching ticket into the Ireland role if things go wrong over the next little while?
Great question. Great question. If I had the answer to that, I'd be advising Leo and making a lot of money. Look, I don't know that it's total copy and paste. Leo will know that. I would think there's a fair bit of it. I would think there's a fair bit of what he's done there. Ultimately, if you look around the world at countries the size of Ireland, and I'd include Australia in that because their rugby numbers are roughly, they're bigger, but roughly the same. New Zealand have much more players. But the sides, when they perform really well, unlike England and South Africa, they have their provincial sides playing a successful brand for them, and they mimic that brand at the international level. It's not always exactly the same because international rugby is different. There's just such little space in international rugby now because of the rushing D. But if you look at the New Zealanders, and they've been the best, even though they didn't win the last World Cup, they've been the best for 10, 12 years. That's what they've done. And I think Leinster's model is an exceptionally good model. If we watch Munster's performance last weekend, you know, they weren't happy with the end result, but I saw a lot of really positive play from Munster. I thought I could see Stephen Larkin's hand all over that, and Coach Van Graham's got to take credit. He's the guy that's bringing it all together. They didn't finish off. There was a lot of negatives, and they were pretty lucky that Harlequins didn't kick their penalty goals. But I could see what they were trying to do, and that will come through with a bit of time. They're behind Leinster. They're a work in progress, but I can see what they're trying to do. Now, if they get those two and Ulster, who are trying their guts out, not quite there either, and Connor, again, what a gutsy performance from Connor. Everyone playing similarly with a similar philosophy, and they're not far off it right now. And the national team doing the same thing, I think that is a way forward. And Leo's a guy that can bring that sort of model together. Whether he brings Stuart Lancaster with him, that's up to Leo, or Felipe Conopami, I don't know. That's up to Leo. But that would be my thinking.
Could you see Lancaster being pulled from under Leo, brought up as head coach to Ireland, and you kind of have the best of both worlds in that way? Like, can you see Lancaster reprising his role as a head coach?
No.
Right.
And I think that would be a big mistake for Stuart. A very, very big mistake for Stuart. He has thrived and grown as an assistant coach, and we don't want to make the same mistake twice. I think Stuart obviously has learned, like we all do. We all do learn while you're on the job. And that's the problem with being a head coach. Usually when you just got to figure it out, no one will give you a job because you've been sacked too many times. But it's Stuart, to me, and I don't know him, but I admire what he's done. I really, really admire what he's done. He has copped a really humiliating kick in the teeth leaving England, and he's accepted a role as an assistant that I think he is brilliant at. And some guys are just brilliant assistant coaches, but they're not great head coaches. And I don't see that as I'm not being derogatory in any way, because they're totally different roles. Assistant coaches get to do a lot more coaching than the head coach. The head coach has to do a lot more other things, and they're burdens. They're not pleasant things. And a lot of dealing with personnel, dealing with boards, CEOs, budgets, all these things, where assistant coach gets to coach. And I think Stuart's done a wonderful job on that, and I think Leinster have benefited. But you've got to give Leo massive credit for pulling that whole system together. That's a head coach's gig. And I wouldn't want to see Stuart then taken out from what he's been really great at, which is coaching, to being a head coach where he's got to spend more of his time doing other things. And I think we're seeing that with Andy. Andy was and remains one of the best defensive coaches rugby's ever seen. Now, whether he is equally adept at being a head coach, the jury is very much out. Now, I'm not against him being great as a head coach. I'd hope the guy could do it. He's a really good bloke. It's not my point. My point is he should have been given opportunities to do this at club level on a number of occasions, like Fabien Galtier has done with Stade Francais, Montpellier and Toulon, and had his successes and his failures on that journey before he was appointed French coach. With Andy Farrell, he hasn't done that at all, so he's learning at the top job. Why would we then put one of our most successful homegrown Irish coach as far as winning trophies in Leo Cullen and then not give him the job? And I think we've got to stop this cultural cringe with our coaches. You've got Ronan O'Gara doing an unbelievably good job with La Rochelle. They just won on Saturday. They're leading the top 14. They're coming fourth after one game in Pool A in the Heineken Cup. Ronan's doing an unbelievable job. Jeremy Davidson's down at Breve, fighting for his life, doing a great job. The guy's been given hard gigs and he's a scrapper. He's going through, doing a wonderful job. Mark McCall over at Saracens, doing an incredible job as well. And we've got Leo Cullen. These are all guys that have worn the green jersey, that are local boys, and they are now fantastically experienced coaches. We've got to start appointing Indigenous guys into these roles, not keep bringing in so many overseas guys. We need overseas guys. You bring, even though I've got an Irish passport, I'm overseas. I've got no problems with bringing in guys to provide some technical input and support. Ireland's done that brilliantly for 20 years. Andy Friend's doing a great job over in Connacht. Look, he's wonderful. Van Graham and his coaching staff, all foreigners, all doing a great job down there, and they're providing their knowledge to the Irish players. That is wonderful. But it is time to come back to having Indigenous coaches after this regime. Now, whenever that is, I'm not saying we get rid of them now, whenever that is, but the Indigenous coaches have earned the right to be national coaches. And we have to start thinking like that and not looking the other way. And I do think, even though I don't have an Irish accent, so I'm speaking against myself, to have Irishness in the coaching team, I think is important. I think is important. Not everyone has to be, but I do believe there is some that's needed.
Matt, good stuff. Thanks a million. Happy Christmas to you.
You too. Happy Christmas, guys. Keep safe.
Always great to chat to you. It's Matt Williams with some thought-provoking stuff for us there this morning. 087 9 180 180.